A great shadow has fallen over the kingdom as the undead continue to multiply under the control of a dread necromancer. The king's army is broken, the land's overrun, and now the castle has fallen. The last of the kingdom's strength has taken refuge in the hallowed ground of the monastery, where the necromancer and his dead dare not tread. Yet. As he tightens his grip on the land and builds his power for a final assault on this last refuge, a few brave souls seek to fight back. Okay. Catweazle here, welcome back, and this is my playthrough of Darkest Night. Here we have the game world, the kingdom, and as you can see, it's split into 7 different locations. We have the mountains, we have the castle, the monastery, the last bastion of light, we have the village, the swamp, the forest, and the ruins. All the gameplay takes place within these separate locations, and they all have different attributes to them. The monastery is where our 4 heroes will start, and what I've done is I've gone for a classic dungeoneering party, even though we're not in a dungeon. So what we've got is a fighter by way of the knight. By way of a rogue character, we've got the rogue. By way of a healer, we have a priest. And by way of a magic user, we have a wizard. So all these guys are in the start in the monastery. So we need an antagonist, and that is, of course, the necromancer. So he starts in the ruins. As you can see, I've used these stands I was using in Eldritch Horror. I'm going for a more top-down look in the video. Shouldn't need too much camera movement because, as you can see, the board is tiny compared to Arkham or Eldritch. So, nice little board. I'd be able to sit down and play this if I wasn't videoing it without having to get up, which makes a nice change. So, that's where all our characters and the necromancer start. Another thing we have to do is we have to add in the relics, and you put those in the marked places on the board, and those take the form of these chests. So there we go, and as you can see, each chest has 3 keyholes on it. That's because in the base game you needed 3 keys to open them, and when you open them you got a relic. Slightly different during this playthrough because I have all the expansions. So I've got Darkest Night, the base game. I've also got the first expansion with an inner light, which I got as part of the Necromancer bundle, which also has Unshifting Winds, which is the second expansion. And we've got the third expansion, which is From the Abyss. That's From the Abyss. And the final expansion, which is In Tales of Old. All the expansions bring other stuff. The first expansion, with an inner light, that brought us the quest cards. So as part of the setup, we do start with a quest in the village. So we'll put that on there, find out what that is in a bit. And second expansion, what that brought us on Shifting Winds, that was just basically more of the same regarding cards, a few extra characters and stuff like that. But the third expansion, From the Abyss, that brought us darkness cards. And darkness cards are used on the darkness track down here. So when we're doing the darkness track, we need this little counter. Starts at 0 obviously, and then each turn we move it along, and when we get to 10 and 20 then we will draw a darkness card. There is an optional variant that's slightly trickier where we also use the base game. In the base game, when it got to 10 plus, you created 2 blights at the necromancer's location instead of 1. If there were none there, you can sort of additionally do that as well. But to start with, we'll just use the darkness cards as they were intended, which was instead of that and instead of 20. After 20, you do what it does say on the board. So those are the darkness cards that came with From the Abyss. And the final expansion gave us mystery cards. Now mystery cards take over from the keys. If you remember on the relics, had 3 keyholes there in the chest, so you needed 3 keys to get the relic. Well, what you do now is where you'd gain a key through an event or anything like that, then you will draw a mystery card, and the mystery card gives the heroes the opportunity to get clues. So that's why we've got a little clue token here, a little purple clue token. That goes here on the track as well. And when you get to 10, you can spend your clues to get a holy relic. So that's a slight change. Why do you need a holy relic? Well, it's because of this guy, the necromancer. Now, you can only kill the necromancer and destroy him with a roll of 7 on a d6. Even Catweazle would struggle getting 7 on a d6. So how do you kill him? Well, the holy relic gives you +1. It's as simple as that. So if you roll a natural 6, then +1 is 7 and you defeat the necromancer. Although there are times in the game where you can roll more than a single die, they're not. You don't add them together, so you get a success just based on a single die. You can roll as many as you like, depending on powers or other modifiers that you get, but you have to roll the success on a single die. You can't add things together to get a success. Right, so we've done the basic setup of the board. Apart from one thing, we've got a couple of decks I haven't gone through. So let's investigate one of them now, and that's the map deck. As you see, quite a thick deck here, and use this for placing stuff. So if you search an area, for example, because the heroes will want to search for things like artifacts or for mystery cards. If they get a key, for example, on one of these maps, then that will give them the opportunity to draw a mystery card. So that's how you get holy relics. That's how you get things like artifacts. You can get other things as well, like supply caches, which allow you to get extra powers. And you can get things like epiphanies. Well, you can only get that at the swamp, and that's where you can look through your powers and pick and choose the one you want. And you also get things like magical items. So each area has like a preferred attribute where it will give you more of that sort of thing, and these little icons tell you what they are. So first thing we've got to do is place some blights though. The heroes are trying to kill the necromancer. The necromancer thinks he's won. He thinks he's just a mopping up operation to consolidate his power. The monastery is the thorn in his side, but by placing blights about the board, he can hope that he will build up the blights in the kingdom, and the more he builds them up, they will start overflowing from these areas. I think you're allowed 4 blights in each area. Once you start getting more than 4 in an area, it will overflow into the monastery. Once the monastery gets over 4 blights, that's it, it's game over. the monastery has fallen. So what we've got to do is the heroes have got to get a holy relic, you've got to power up, get some stuff together and kill the necromancer before that happens. But first, the first round of the game, the necromancer, because he's just won that battle, gets to put a blight in every single area. So let's have a look at the map. Right, so I'll put these down. What we've got is the mountains has got an enigma, the castle has got a flux cage, we've got a stigma at the village, we've got raids at the swamp, we've got zombies at the forest, and in the ruins we've got an unlucky aura. We don't start the game with a blight at the monastery, which is good because it's desecration and that's a horrible one. So these are the blights that you place when the necromancer moves, or like now at the start of the game. And remember I mentioned search actions. Well, if you're in a particular place like the swamp, then you'd get an artifact, for example. So that's how the map cards work. So I'll just place those and then we'll be straight back. And here we are with all the blights. Let's run through what the blights mean. I'll run through one. So which one shall we pick? One that we've got on the board would help. So let's have a look at the zombies that are in the forest. So on the back of the rule book, it explains the blights. So here's zombies. At the end of each turn, in an affected location, a hero must combat a zombie. So if there's a hero in that location, by the end of the turn, you've got to fight them. They've got a might of 5, which you need to roll the same as or better. No defence, you die, and it's got 5 sort of armour, 3 to elude them. If you lose, you die, as I say. So those are zombies, and you have to get rid of blights. If there's a blight in an area with the necromancer and you're trying to kill the necromancer, you have to get rid of the blight first. So blights are just a general pain. They're nasty. So we don't like them and we need to get rid of them. So there's an example of a blight. Again, similar to the heroes and the necromancer, just put a little stand on them just for ease of videoing so you know where they are on the board. So that's the blight set out, one for each location except for the monastery at the start of the game. Let's have a look at a couple of the other decks. So we'll discard that. We've got an event deck. Now, we won't use this in the initial first turn because you don't have to draw an event when you're in the monastery. But any other place on the board, you'll draw an event card. And these cards are just something else that the hero have got to deal with on their round. So they get one action each, and they will get an event card if they're not in the monastery. So that's something else for them to deal with. As you can see, plenty of cards, plenty of variability. So I'll put those back. One of the things they can find when they search is an artifact. So we've got an artifact deck here. They're very similar to the powers that you'll see in a moment, but artifacts can be traded. So you can trade them between heroes. They're not specific to heroes, artifacts, whereas powers are. The powers, as you'll see, will be specific to the knight, to the priest, to the wizard and the rogue. But these artifacts can be found, powerful help, and you can also trade them in between all your heroes. So those are artifacts. So those are the 6 decks that we'll be using. Spoken about the about our heroes briefly. Let's have a closer look at them, shall we? So we'll go across to the player area. And here's our fighter character, the Knight. Just a few things to explain. Each hero has a couple of attributes. They have the thing here with the angel wings, that's called grace. And they also have an attribute called secrecy. Grace is a bit weird death in this game. You can only die if your grace is at 0 and you take another killing blow. But while it's up here, for example, she's at 5, you can see where the default spot for a person's grace or secrecy is on each character, because it has a little circle. So she's at 5. If she was to receive a killing blow at 5, then the grace that she's got will sort of deflect that blow. So it's like a health wound, but it isn't. So as long as you've got grace, you can take death blows, but when you get back to 0 and you take another one, then your character will die. So she starts at 5. A secrecy is at 6, and what secrecy is, it's how visible you are to the necromancer. The idea is you've escaped that final battle, and as a last ditch sort of guerrilla attempt to kill the necromancer, you're sneaking around, try and get this holy relic so you can take him on. So it's how visible you are to the necromancer and his forces. The less secrecy you've got, there's more chances that he will notice you and he will come and try and destroy you. So your secrecy is very important. Both of these can be refreshed. You can move them up as well as down. You can do that by hiding. You can do it by moving to other locations, but we'll see that a bit more in the gameplay. Each character also has this large token, which is the sun on one side and the moon on another. In Darkest Night, anybody can take a turn in any order. So each time it comes to the hero's sort of turn, we can do it in any order we choose. So we've got these little tokens just to remind us that when somebody goes, we'll just flip it to the other side and we know they've gone for this particular turn. So that's what that is. She hasn't gone yet, so we'll keep it as a nice little sun. Right, in order to help our heroes fight the necromancer, we have powers. And to start the game, there are 4 powers that have a little symbol like this in the top right hand corner. So you pick 3 powers out of those 4. What I've done is, for our knight, I've picked Hard Ride as our first power. And what that allows you to do, as an action, you can move twice, but you won't gain any secrecy. Normally when you move, you'll gain secrecy, but not using Hard Ride. But you will be able to move twice. So for example, you could go to the village and then you could move on to, say, the swamp in a single turn. Normally you'd only be able to move once, but this allows her to move twice. The second power that she's starting with is Sprint, and this is a tactic. You use tactics during combat or defence. This one allows her to elude with 2 dice. Normally the default is a single die, but with this tactic, if she decides to run off, she can elude with 2 dice. And finally, she's got another similar power with Charge, but this one's a bit more aggressive and a bit more knight-like, in that this is another tactic, so when in combat, she can fight with 2 dice. Instead of run away. So those are her 3 powers. The other starting power and the later powers go into this. This is her deck of powers. There's another 7 in there, and as we progress through the game, we can find things like supply caches, and they will allow us to take another card off the top here. There is also a thing called an Epiphany, which you can get in the swamp, and that will allow you to pick any card. So you can go through, have a look and pick what is the best one. But other than that, what you do is find a supply cache and it'll say something like, take the top 2 cards and pick which one you want. You pick which one you want, and then the one you don't want you'd put on the base of the deck. So that's how you get extra powers, and this is the deck you will take them from. Put that up here. There's another thing that happens with powers. Some of them will become active. If a power becomes active, what I'll do is I'll just move it above the character like that, so we know it's active. If it gets exhausted, I'll probably just flick it forward like that. So I know that I can't use it again till we do something like hide or go to the monastery, and then we would flick it back. Right, what else? Well, let's have a read of our knight character. One of the things I don't like doing is using like, oh, the knight does this, the wizard does that. So I've actually given them names. I've got to give characters names. It's just one of my things, man. So I've decided to call our lovely knight Cassandra. Sounds a good ladylike knightly name. So this is Cassandra, and let's read about her. The knight is a devout warrior, capable of great feats of strength. High grace and many offensive powers allow the knight to stay in a fight longer than other heroes, and make her especially well suited to scouring blights from the land. The knight derives strength from her vows, and is excellent in the single-minded pursuit of an important task. So that's Cassandra. Right, next up, we shall have a look at our priest. And here is our priest character. His grace is at 6, his secrecy is at 6, so that's pretty well rounded, that's pretty cool. His powers, I've chosen intercession, which is a bonus. Whenever a hero at your location loses or spends grace, they may spend your grace instead. So he sacrifices his own grace for other players. Just the sort of thing that any right-minded priest would be prepared to do. He's also got Sanctuary. This is a very strong card. It's a tactic, can use during combat, and he can elude that combat with 4 dice. So that's brilliant. He'll lose a secrecy if he succeeds, but having 4 dice to sort of do a runner, that's very strong. Very good card. And his final power to start with is benediction. This is also an action you can play during combat, and one hero at your location gains 1 grace up to the default. If you remember, the default's the little circle on whatever character he plays this on. If they now have more grace than you will gain 1 grace. So that's a way for him to get grace back. If he gives grace to, say, the knight, and they end up on 6 grace, but he only has 4, then he will move up to 5. So, again, pretty good card. So, let's have a read of the priest. What's the priest's name? Well, I've decided to call the priest Priorus. Let's have a read of his narrative. The priest is uniquely capable of holding the dark forces of the necromancer at bay. While not specifically effective at direct fighting, the priest can use holy power to deny combat to the undead while supporting and healing his allies. The priest's blessings provide enduring benefits to the hero of his choosing, and he is particularly adept at restoring grace to himself and others. So, good healing character. Should be able to keep the fighting characters in tip-top shape. So, good stuff. Right, next up, we'll have a look at our rogue character. And here is our rogue character. His grace starts on 4, so his grace isn't that hot, but his secrecy, as you might expect from a rogue type character who'll be sneaking around a lot, is right up at 7. That's his default. Right, what powers have I picked? Well, the first one is Vanish. So it's a tactic, so during combat he can elude with 2 dice. He gains 1 secrecy, up to 7, if he rolls 2 successes with those dice. So there's a way for him to get secrecy back, and he's also got more of a chance of eluding during a combat. Next power is Ambush. So this is also a tactic. He can spend 1 secrecy to fight with 3 dice. So that's very strong. If he does have to fight, if he's cornered, spending 1 of his secrecy, he can get 3 combat dice. Excellent stuff. And his final power is Eavesdrop. This is an action. You can spend 1 secrecy to search with 2 dice. Again, this is very strong. We have got to find a relic. So having a character that can use 2 dice to do that, to search, try and get a key on the map card, that will give him the opportunity to have a look at a mystery card and get a few clues, get the clues up to past 10, and then we can spend them on getting a relic. So he's got eavesdrop, another strong card. Our rogue, who is called Talon. So let's have a read of Talon's narrative. The rogue is a subtle hero, uniquely able to maintain a low profile and escape notice. This secrecy in turn can be used by the rogue to perform special tasks too dangerous for others to attempt. The rogue functions well as an assassin or saboteur, whittling away at the necromancer's ebon grip without presenting a target for counterattack. So that's your typical rogue. He's going to be sneaking around, trying to cause problems from the shadows. So hopefully he'll be a good character for us. Right, finally, let's have a look at our final character, who is the Wizard. And here we are with the Wizard. The Wizard's a bit of a worry, because he's only got 3 grace. He's your typical glass cannon, so we might have to protect him a bit. With only 3 grace, we're not looking for him to really be getting involved in any prolonged combats. He's got to sort of get in there, do the business, and do a runner. So, what have I picked for the Wizard? Well, I've picked invisibility. This is a tactic, so again, during combat, he can activate this card. Remember, use the term activate. So, this card gets activated as a tactic. And when it's active, you get +2 dice when eluding. And that'll stay active until such time as you fail a combat or you use another tactic. So if he activates this, rolls 2 dice against, say, the zombies in the forest, fails, then this will fail and it will deactivate and it will be exhausted. So we'll flip it forward. But if he passes, then it will stay active and he will stay invisible. But if he wants to use another one of his powers, for example, that is a tactic, then that will also cause him to no longer be invisible anymore. So that's his invisible power. Next up is teleport. This is an action. Can exhaust to move directly to any location, and he gains 2 secrecy up to his default of 5. But oh, in fact it doesn't say default, so up to 5. Because it doesn't use the word default, it's not restricted. Some of the blights affect your default values, but it just says 5 here, so you would go back to 5 immediately. So this is teleport. It'll allow us to get anywhere on the board. Could be extremely useful. We might have situations where other characters can't get to a particular location, but hopefully our Wizard will be able to do so. That's an action. And finally, we've got a bit of an offensive spell with Lightning Strike. What self-respecting Wizard doesn't have a Lightning Strike? This is a tactic. So if he had invisibility active, it would deactivate as soon as he used Lightning Bolt, which is quite sensible really. You're not going to stay invisible while you're throwing lightning bolts about. So it's a tactic, use it in combat. You fight with 3 dice and you exhaust if you succeed. So again, if we casted and succeeded, we'd just flick it forward like that and we'd know it was exhausted. And you'd have to hide or go back to the monastery to unexhaust them. Right, so that's the Wizard. So let's have a read of his narrative. The Wizard's name is Rathymnon. So the Wizard is a specialist in mysterious energies and arcane secrets. With this knowledge, he can be quite effective at a variety of tasks. However, he is very vulnerable after his spells have been expended, and he requires frequent rest to restore his powers when they have been depleted. The Wizard's runes can provide beneficial effects across the entire kingdom. So that's Rathymnon's powers and background. Right, so those are our 4 characters. So let's pop back to the board and just have a short review, and then we'll get ready for starting the game. So here we are back at the board. I'll go through things like the hero turn and the actions that can be taken and the necromancer's turn during the first turn of the game. As it is, we're just at setup here. So let's find out what our initial quest is. I should mention that an initial quest is optional. You can just let the quests show up as normal and not have an initial one. But it is an optional rule that you can start with a quest. And I thought, in order to see, you know, what the game's about, we may as well start with the initial quest. So let's have a look at what it is. Nightmares. Right. So this symbol here means we've got, essentially, we've got 2 turns to do it, which isn't very long. So we've got 2 turns to complete what's ever on this card. We need to achieve the success condition once. So let's have a read of it. A young girl has had a prophetic dream warning of an imminent disaster. I mean, hell, no kidding. The details are unclear, but the matter is desperately urgent. What can be worse than the old place being overrun by a necromancer? So we need to spend 1 grace in order to get a success during the action phase in this location. If we complete it, we get a charm. If it expires though, 3 new quests will populate the village. So that's a bit grim. But hopefully we will be able to get here in time. Let's put that on a little stand so it doesn't take up too much space. So we'll need to get a character there to deal with that so we don't get 3 new quests like coming up at the village. The stigma is there, so we'll have to deal with that blight, as well as deal with this card. In the game you only get 1 action, so if I was to, we've essentially lost one of those turns because we will have to move to the village. We'll get to the end of the turn, that will get a timer on it, and we'll have 1 left, so we'd have to deal with it next turn. So we're a bit up against it on that particular quest. Right, so as I say, I'll go through the turn actions for both the heroes and the necromancer during the first turn of the game. So that's it. It's all set up. It's all ready to go. Thank you for watching. Thanks for also the subscriptions. Thank you for any comments. As always, much appreciated. And I hope you'll join me shortly for turn 1 of Darkest Night. Until then, this is me, Catweazle, signing off. Toodaloo.